my gosh, it's always so terrifying to be up here because I never know what these guys are going to say. They always surprise me, keep me on my toes.
Yeah, I'm nervous about the no holds barred thing too. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, all good, all good. Well, I wanted to sort of start out with like, what is the future of entertainment for you guys? I'm going to go a little serious and we'll go more fun because what we've heard when we've done these talks before is that people want to know, what's it like to be a Bushnell? Why are you guys crazy? Are you not crazy? All of that kind of fun stuff. But I wanted to start out with like, with the future of entertainment and how Atari started and in that era, and how does that differ, like Nolan, from today in the XI world?
Well, Atari happened basically because of a series of happy accidents. I was the only electrical engineer that put himself through college working in an amusement park and having an arcade, so I knew the coin-op game business. And I also went to the University of Utah where they had a space war because of Dr. Evans. And you put those three together and then Ampex, and it was just natural.
For me, the embodied side that we can do now is absolutely magical, and the thing that has been a transformation for me is being able to be the character. You can now, rather than control it with your thumbs or dancing around in front of a screen, to be able to walk around unbounded is absolutely next level. And I don't know if you've gotten a chance to check out Dream Park down in the expo hall floor, but we've got 1,000 square feet there of playable space that you can just hold a headset to your face, and when you can be the character that you have watched on the screen or controlled from afar, I feel it completely changes your entertainment experience.
Wyatt, you want to add anything?
I think what I kind of love about experiential right now is I always say every video game you play, every game you play is kind of like a tutorial for the next game you play. And so I feel like we're really able to sort of push what experiences we're able to have, because I think there's this sort of audience confluence about what they understand about game mechanics and what they understand about experiences. So I think I'm excited just about the past 40 years of just frankly not even technical innovations, but just design innovations and how those have been disseminated to people. So I think that's really one of the parts about the history of entertainment, or the future of entertainment, that I look at. End of sentence.
I was testing an Android XR device today, the Muhan, and the tracking, the hand tracking, was the same as on the Quest. And here was a design language that's emerging as a standard, and it was, and I was able to just walk right up, and the guys demoing it were like, "Oh, have you used this before?" I was like, "No, but it is similar enough to everything else. This is great. This is a design language that works."
Dylan, do you want to add?
Yeah, I think, is my mic working? Yes. I think there's a few lenses you can kind of answer this with. I think on the hardware side, it's just going to get more human from, really capturing and probably exceeding the human sensorium, basically, right? But then I think the other lenses are sort of from a content perspective. I think Brent's right. There's going to be a lot of more individuation and personalization and less analogy, right? And then I think one maybe interesting question around it is from a kind of a goals perspective, is how is in a media landscape that is so individuated, where do our shared stories come from, and how can they become our shared stories? Yeah.
Getting social back to being in the same space. Social, social for a lot of folks now means an MMO or an online connection. But to be able to go out into the real world and be social, but we were joking earlier that the real world has pretty terrible game mechanics, but game mechanics are amazing at sort of keeping you right in flow. You're not too bored. You're not too stressed. And so being able to sort of get people back in public, socializing, and through the lens of a game is a superpower.
I think it's really interesting that, right now we're actually in a simulation. And to be at a place where we're looking at simulations while being in a simulation is pretty interesting. You know?
Very meta.
I was about to say meta.
Well, to put it in context, what is the Turing test for VR or AR? And I think that we're really, 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 really much closer, because if you look how far we've come in the last X years, I don't think we have to go very far in the future where we pass the Turing test, and then we will be in the simulation.
And maybe the Turing test for XR is, do you know that you are not in this experience? Right, and we've got some inflatable blocks. This is a terrible example. We got these inflatable blocks downstairs, so they're the same scale as the blocks in our game. And like, I don't know, 50% of people will go and kick the real world blocks, thinking they're the virtual blocks, you know. And so there's something there around.
Well, I noticed how I was afraid to step on the block that was in the middle of the ocean, of the water, and I knew, you know, in my brain that it was really not there, no danger, but I didn't do it.
Well, so with that, I think, you know, Dad, with what you've done in the arcade world, right? I'm wondering what XR developers today can learn from the arcade model with regards to user flow and intuitive mechanics and social engagement for the XR world. I wonder if any of you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, So I used to do arcade games before I switched to video, and I found that the years of development that I put into location-based entertainment really informed how we design games in video. Because one of the implicit restrictions of location-based entertainment is people have to understand the game before they even start playing it. They have to walk up and know how to play the game. Because that's basically your advertising. And so that means no tutorials, that means no nothing. It's you just need to be able to intuitively play the game. I do think that's one problem in games right now is just that there isn't as heavy of an emphasis on that sort of intuitive play. And I think the games that probably break out hit the most do have that sort of intuition. But it's I've never played a tutorial that I like. Who has ever had fun playing a tutorial? They're intrinsically not fun. And so I do feel there's, I think that's the one thing that I would really pull in, is just really actively play testing and getting that sort of qualitative feedback on your title, on your game, on your experience, and saying what do people want to do when they first pick up the thing? And how do I build an experience that emphasizes what they actually just natively want to do with my game?
You're also sort of a different person in public than you are at home. And you'll take a little longer to puzzle through something that if you are in public, you really have time pressure. You know, you're in a social environment, you're not willing to maybe suffer through it in public, learning how to do this thing. And so I think arcades do a really good job of, to your point, getting to the meat of the game immediately as fast as possible. You're not having to do any learning, and you're playing. And the, menus are the death of that. If it's your first time seeing something, you have to make some decisions in a menu. You don't know what you're doing, and you've never seen this thing before. How do you rationalize that decision? And so I think for a lot of development, the arcade time pressure of being in public is a really important piece.
But I do think that thinking that you have that affordance of people bashing their heads against your experience at home is indicative of the problem. I don't think we should actually leverage that. I don't actually think we have that affordance.
I see. Good point. It's a bug at home too.
It's a bug at home. It's just it's indoctrinated into the industry and how we generate content.
Well, one of the things you have to do is not look at your customer as homogeneous. They're very, very different tastes. For example, I don't play first-person shooters because I'm really, really bad at it. Because you lose 5 milliseconds of reaction time every year you're over 26 years old.
5 milliseconds of reaction time every year?
So basically, if I were to play a first-person shooter with you guys, I'd be dead and you'd have packed up and gone home before I knew that I was even hurt.
But you weren't good at them when you were 50 either. So what's the...
I remember Wyatt trying to teach me how to play World of Warcraft, and he said to me, "This is like teaching a monkey Japanese. You don't even know what you're doing."
Well, the other thing, I think that sometimes when you're a tech head, you tend to equate success with complexity. When in fact, my first game, Computer Space, was really a tour de force at the technology at the time, but Pong was the one that rang the bell. And so I find that I play Beat Saber in VR more than I do a lot of the other stuff, because it's but simple. And so I think sometimes looking for that really simple, addictive game is maybe a more productive vein to plumb.
I think constraints are interesting. And for example, I mean, like the quarters in arcade games. So many kind of awesome things came out of them, right? Like the you could say death came out of it in games, having extra lives, right? Also just the time span of how long they want you to play the game and how the game's going to ramp up in difficulty in order to get you out or putting another quarter in. And so I think that there's sort of a question mark in XR and every field of games is what are the awkward pieces that are ultimately going to define that medium in the future, right? And I think it's okay to kind of dig in on them. And I mean, yeah, I think Brian Eno said something, whatever you now find weird or ugly about a medium will surely become its signature. And yeah, so.
I think technology, I wonder what you guys think the technology constraints of the XR world are right now and how that's going to shape either culturally where we move to or hold it back.
I know something that really inspired me. My co-founder, Aidan Wolf, at Dream Park, said, hey, let's get rid of the headsets, the headset straps, so you just hold it to your face. And that simple thing, now all of a sudden you're in the game instantly. You're in the game in a second, and it's not messing up anybody's hair. And the simplicity of that also allowed you to duck out of the world and put it back and confirm. And the sort of opportunity for new kinds of play that invites a real hybrid experience. Sometimes you're in the headset, sometimes you're not. I think this was one that was just felt so revolutionary and new when it first happened, and I think it's going to become a standard.
Well, but it's also interesting because that also provides a different level of challenge, right? Where you actually can then only use one hand. You can't, because the other hand is being used to hold up things, so you can't do the Beat Saber thing.
But you are using it in order to get this little window into the world.
Right. But it's a different constraint, right? It's just it's one of those edge cases. It's a different constraint that then determines how you play, right? And I think when we look at play in, this family has played every game known to man together, or woman, or person, or thing. If we can play it, we play it. And there's debates about what type of games we all like, but I think everyone on here, actually, I think, how many of you in the audience feel like you are a gamer, or call yourself a gamer? Let's see. Okay, how many of you play Wordle? Okay, how many of you play crossword puzzles? Okay, so if everyone who raised their hand for Wordle, crossword puzzles, and gamers, everyone raise your hand, it's gonna be 90% of this room, right? And I think the point is that everyone really actually is a gamer, but I think the way that we've been defined as what a gamer is sort of a narrow construct. And I think XR has this opportunity to sort of transform, how people think about games, not just from your phone, but from your visor to arcades to Xboxes, et cetera. I don't really know where I was going with this, but I sort of liked it.
Totally. There's no, but there is the future of entertainment isn't entertainment at all, maybe. That it's, you think about all of the trucking simulator and farming simulators, right? Where People mostly just want a well-constructed system to operate in, and it doesn't even have to have entertainment as its primary goal.
I do love that people finish work and then get home and play a job simulator for the next few hours. You know, it's like.
Well, you know, I want to flog my hobby horse right now. I've got a company called Exodexa, which is out of the box, and we are revolutionizing education. And the data is that you remember 5% of what you hear, 10% of what you see, and 80% of what you do. And gamified education provides the doing, so it makes learning very, very, very sticky. And there's this concept in games and in life, which is called flow, in which you become addicted. You lose time, and you start playing the game, and an hour and a half later, you come out and you're there. It turns out that if you're in the state of flow, the brain flap is open to remember knowledge like you've never done before. And so we actually believe that we're going to be able to teach 4 years of high school in less than 6 months.
I don't
Gamified.
believe that, by the way, just so you know, for the record.
Well, but I will say the piece about that really resonated with me was spaced repetition, right? The idea that you can be, if you had a taxonomy of what you were trying to teach someone and you taught them something and then spaced out the time in which you reminded them, if you're reminded in a day, you remember it a week. You're reminded a week later, you remember it a month. You know, that the second you had that XR experience delivering a learning, pedagogy, you could be very intentional about reminding in a way that would make you remember it.
And what better way to understand something about the circulation system is to be a corpuscle.
Say that again?
If you want to learn something about the circulation system, be in the VR corpuscle.
It's like, to that end, it's the repetition is repetition's almost that's like a failure state, right? Because it's like if
you forgot, you didn't learn the lesson the first time.
The stakes weren't high enough the first time,
Right, yeah.
right? Like, yeah.
So I want to sort of you want to say something?
Yeah, can we go back to like the notion about like the casual gamer versus more hardcore gamer? Because I do think it's kind of interesting given like the state of the video game industry right now. Because I think a lot of people are talking about like the struggles that the games industry is seeing on the like stock market and that sort of thing. I do think there is this like, for the past like X amount of years, there's been this like knee-jerk reaction to want to appeal to more casual gamers. But I think what we're actually seeing right now, based on the data, is fewer people spending more time with games. But I think that's basically turning like, it's this kind of like hardcore, not like niche, but it is a more hardcore subset. And I think like for me as a designer, like as a game developer, it does change the sort of games I'm going to make. Because like, if I'm not trying to appeal as much to like the people playing Wordle, I have to appeal more to the people who have played 5 video games in the past year. I do think that is like for the foreseeable future, sort of where I see the games industry going. I think like, especially in the VR space, I feel like that's the case. It's like, if I was going to design a VR game or an XR game right now, I would design it around like, what would I want somebody who's played Gorilla Tag? Like, what do I think would be interesting to them? And what do I think are like the verbs that I can piggyback on there?
Man, so disagree. Only because there's just not that many headsets out there, and so we have a couple of examples of big businesses built on the back of VR, and the opportunity to get more people into headsets is for me the ginormous prize. We finally have a $300 headset adjusted for inflation that's cheaper than the Nintendo was. Right? What we need is more Super Mario Brothers, more titles that get people just to mow down whatever barrier in order to play.
You need more Beat Sabers.
More Beat Sabers, more Gorilla Tags.
But what about I'm walking the floor earlier today. There's a proliferation of classes out there. Is that the next? I mean, is the visor going to go away for the glasses?
Glasses are amazing. We all want them to be smaller and more natural because, that's going to open it up for me, that casual player, that it's going to get it off the hardcore. It's going to make it accessible for everybody. The simpler this gets, the more that it gets like natural motions that you use in your normal day, you can put your grandma in it.
What is this casual VR player to you? Like, what is their experience with games? What's a casual VR player to you?
I mean, for me, a casual VR player is everyone from my 4-year-old to, my dad being able to walk into our game, be up and running in seconds, and play for as long as they want.
A demographic that's everybody is like not a demographic though, right? That's just the there's a different word for that. I think it's called population, right?
Incidentally,
Like if you target everybody, you're targeting nobody.
That's fair.
you got to understand.
My younger
the
brother, my
Bushnell-
youngest brother. Yeah, it's good.
Sorry, I'm just wondering what we're talking
no,
about.
The Bushnell dinner table has been described as verbal hand-to-hand combat.
This is the most moderated we've ever been, just so you know. And I'm trying to make it a little less moderated, but like we're being polite with each other.
I asked one question. Define a demographic.
But when we're talking about casual play, that is something that can be accessible to a broad set of people. Now, a upper class, middle class, someone who might be able to afford a headset, but that's a luxury. Okay, so we could probably say that our demographics at least that, but for me, the accessibility here of something that you don't need to have played 5 video games in order to know how to do it, right? This is something that if you know how to navigate reality, you know how to be able to play in this space.
Like there might be an answer to your guys' kind of spectrum, which is that it's about mature versus immature mediums. That, like Wyatt, you're speaking from the perspective of kind of PC and console, right? Where there's so many genres and their norms and the knowledge you need in order to be able to enjoy it, so that you aren't drinking from a fire hose of knowledge, right? Versus some VR where it's much more nascent, it's less established, everybody has to learn those new skills in order to appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would, yeah, the video games industry is a mature market at this point. And I think that's what people are grappling with. I do wonder when we're going to finally call VR a mature industry, because, like,
Really
studios...
soon. Really soon.
Yet again.
You got to get closer to the
Yeah.
passing the train test.
I heard that 5 years ago.
Right now, for me, the simple game is Beat Saber. The more difficult game is one that I've been playing called Ghost of Tabor from a company called Combat Waffle. And it's a bitch, but I love it, And so I'm still trying to play on that. I got to tell you a story, though. Do you know the best VR experience I had was on a roller coaster in Germany? Remember that one? Mm-hmm. And you had a VR headset, and all of a sudden you're on this roller coaster, and the simulation was that you were on a runaway mine train, and it was going down, zipping and what have you, and it was coordinated with the roller coaster track to the point where the mine car ended, flew through the air, landed on the back of a dragon, and you could feel the wings of the dragon doing. And
How'd they accomplish the wings?
what?
How did they accomplish the wings?
Well, it was that's what you saw, but the way you felt was the track. So
They
matched
matched the
it with
roller coaster like 1-to-1 with this simulation.
Like a section of track that went like this. It
Yeah.
felt like, wow, that's cool.
So it had VR plus the gravity of haptics, and there was another one that we did in which we were in these golf carts, and it was being driven, and it should have been a full self-driving, which we were going to have in the next few years, where you provide the acceleration and the turning and what have you, matching with the VR construct.
HoloRide did that. Shell Games built a whole solution. And the thing, when you go from VR to mixed reality, so many public places can be augmented in that style, right? They beautifully took the haptics of the roller coaster in order to augment that VR experience. To have more free roam haptics on a car with an XR experience. Man, now traveling across LA is a zombie experience. But think about the mall common areas and a water slide. Your go-kart track turned into Mario Kart. All these things with a mixed reality headset get so much more possible because you can still see real life, and the safety side is much better.
If you have full self-driving, you don't have to see out. So what if all the windows become screens? And so now when you're going to work in the self-driving car, you can go to work on the ancient roads of Rome or in the old western town or God forbid, Mars. And so all of a sudden your car can be this virtual passenger train of a synthetic reality.
Well, so we talk a lot about technology a lot in our family. When we get together, every conversation, every dinner table is a debate about what the latest and greatest is. But I'd love to take us a little bit back into the past. And I'd love to know, Dad, what are some of your industry lessons? Where did you get it wrong? And what do you wish you had done differently?
I wish I hadn't screwed up a lot of things.
Why don't we try that one more time? I think you're going to do a lot better on your second try.
Okay, I've had some spectacular successes and some really hitting the wall full speed at 100 miles an hour.
Not investing in Apple where
does that rank?
Where's that one? Yeah.
Yeah, I could have owned a third of Apple computer for $50,000. I turned it down. I regretted it.
We give them a hard time about that. We get so much mileage out of that.
Just so you know.
You turned it down and you put it all into BlackBerry. Yeah.
No, I basically pissed it away, but on other things. I think that what I've found is my successes were right time, right place, right people. My failures were wrong time, wrong place, wrong people. And so what I've done recently is I have said that if you only have one idea for a business, the only time is now. But every time you have an idea for a business, and we can't have a dinner together without us spinning up 3 businesses, do a micro business plan, a little bit of spreadsheet, customer acquisition costs, just thing, put it on the shelf and let it marinate. And you stack up 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10, and somewhere along the line, one of them will whisper to you. That means it's the right time or the right place, or maybe it's the right person, which you might meet at a convention or a cocktail party.
What was a business where you felt like if you had employed that strategy, you would have had more success?
Androbot.
Wait, say that one more time.
Androbot. It was my robotics company, which was way, 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 way too soon. I mean, we didn't even have multitasking software at the time. I was so stupid.
I mean, it took the whole computing industry another 20 years to. I mean, they had
40 years. I mean, it's still not there.
The robot would drive across a carpet and build up static electricity that would then discharge across the motherboard and kill all the sensors, which is not good for a robot. You need sensors are important, and it literally that kind of static isolation took 20 or 40 years.
Well, really, but one of the things I think about in going forward, I hate to talk about my failures, it pisses me off.
Nothing to read into there.
Everybody. But, I'd rather frolic in my successes. I'm sorry. But let's think about what really will change VR. And it will be an emulation of the Matrix. Now, how did Matrix get full VR? Passing the Turing test. They jacked into the back of your brain. Now think about Neuralink, fast forward 10 years, maybe 20, where we all have non-invasive chips planted in our head. And that's where we will get, I think, the Turing test of virtual reality and live in a simulation.
We listened to a great talk from Robert Scoble last week at Edge Esmeralda, and he was talking all about, sovereignty of your brain. The second you got a jack in, some software is running that. Who decides which thoughts they get to see and not? Which parts of your brain are available and which are not? And just the idea that that's a challenge we're going to have to think about is bizarro.
And
Do you think you'll be mining Bitcoin with half of yours?
I do feel like, for me, both as like a consumer and as like somebody who looks at it as like a potential market, I do feel like the hardest part about VR and like AR in my home right now is just the space to like have those experiences and sort of the friction of like getting into that experience. Like, and I think what has been nervous for the medium is like, I don't think video games are like, or games in general are like competing with each other. Like the industry right now is basically saying we're competing with social video because it's so like frictionless to just consume an hour of that content. Like an hour goes by and you're just done. And so like right now it's like the barrier to entry to enjoy an experience is like going onto your computer and like, or like your console and playing that experience. Like that friction, that barrier is feeling insurmountable for some people. And so like the idea of like this next frontier being like strap on your headset, strap on your Vive, like clear out some space in the middle of your living room and experience it. It's like that's probably what makes me the most nervous for this technology to get indoctrinated, because like what we're up against is social video, just as content creators. Like that's who we're battling.
what do you wish content creators knew about creating fun?
I think just that a frictionless experience on like multiple axes is one of the like tent poles of that experience. I think like I'm talking specifically about getting into that experience having too much friction, but then like I talked earlier, just like tutorials are not fun. And so it's like, I think that's one thing. It's just breaking down every barrier that your players are like seeing and experiencing when they get into your game. That's like number one.
You know, that's really interesting because I just was thinking, I can't play VR games in my office because it's too small. I'm kind of surrounded by monitors and stuff. And I have to go outside or into the living room.
You know, for Dream Park, we really take the position that you can do so much out in public. You know, we can, so many experiences are built for the low common denominator of everybody's living room. But if you say, hey, you've got 30,000 feet, we can now build for design for that exact experience where you're going to be able to run and jump and dodge your friends. You know, I think there's something to building for specific space. You can leverage that space, maximize it.
Yeah, you can have a very curated experience, which I think is the power. That's the power of LBE.
And that would then make it frictionless for someone. To your point, now we're competing for entertainment dollars. They go out into public and they meet their friends like it's an escape room.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I'm curious about is there were two things that I loved that I don't do anymore. And one was the controller for the Wii. Doing Wii basketball, or bowling, Wii tennis, was really, really fun. And I don't do it anymore. You know, why? I mean, because there was nothing wrong with it. The other one is, Just Dance and the Xbox. We used to have, there is nothing better for a party than having several cocktails and then doing Just Dance, you know? What?
If you haven't played it with an
nothing better.
80-year-old and a 4-year-old, you are really missing out.
I think the shifting this question from content creators to more like hardware providers, I think I'd like to answer it that way. Because I think that's kind of what you're talking about a bit, is that like we need to, it's best when we're not beholden to a certain game company or organization to give us a sustainable version of an interface or experience, right? Like really, if we can develop our hardware to be more flexible and more modular, we can set the stage for more variation and creative solutions.
What's an example?
I mean, I think the perfect example would be like the gamepads. You know, like the evolution of the gamepad over the last 30 years is obviously it's improved in a lot of different ways, but it's also kind of evolved myopically. I think I think like dad's never able to play a twin stick shooter game because there's never been really an effective replacement except for mouse and keyboard to being able to engage with that kind of content, right? If you step back to the age of the arcade, they were doing everything they could get their hands on, right? Joysticks, buttons, spinners, trackballs, right? And that exploration of interface was part of the
Pong
journey.
is invisible, or is impossible on a touchscreen.
Right.
You really need a knob, or otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah, and so if we're not kind of designing for variation, we are ossifying.
Well, you know, there should be another chair up here for another of our sons, Tyler, who is actually building a Polycade, which has a diversity of controls. So he's getting close to that arcade diversity of user interfaces.
You make a great point that the more haptic elements that you can bring in to close that loop beyond just the headset, just the audio and the video makes just a ginormous difference.
Good point.
Well, so what is one of, I'm just going to add, I'm the one who's going to go back to some other questions for a moment and ask, like, what's one of Dad's philosophies that you've really taken to heart and that you use in your creative process?
Easy to learn, impossible to master. Overcomplicated things over and over and over again. It's so easy to overcomplicate stuff, and you know, until you run 1,000 people through it and you start to see the same mistakes they make over and over again, the simplicity gets easier.
I think striving for like your first win as soon as possible. Staying in the lab too long is like the quickest way to kill whatever you're doing. And so like really making sure you get proof of efficacy on any idea like as soon as possible before you invest too much time into it. And so like for us, when like that kind of morphed into sort of our ideology on playtesting, which is like every week whatever game we're building, we run 4 different groups of playtesters through all of our new content, and that basically dictates like what is working about this content, what's not working, and it also forces deadlines because you have to have that build, you have to have it ready to go, and it keeps you connected to where you're actually at.
Where do you get all those playtesters?
Well, so before it was just like friends and family, but once we released Escape Academy 1, we basically just have a big Discord of a bunch of
You burned
dweebs.
through us quickly.
Yeah, it's called Kleenex testing. Yeah. You like with puzzle games, like once you use a playtester, they're dead to you.
That's what I mean. Is once I'm dead to you, how do you get more for every single week?
Well, now we have enough people just who have played the base game and who like are invested that we have like a pretty consistent churn. So it's much easier now.
Well, I got to say, Wyatt, before Escape Academy, when you were doing King of the Road, it was amazing. He built this arcade game, he installed it at 2-bit, and for 6 months, you were there every Friday watching people interact with it, tweaking the timing, changing, track modes every little bit. And by the time he was done, it was the highest earning attraction in the whole arcade. And it really took that sort of ship early and often experimentation to really get there.
Yeah, just ship like the shittiest article of whatever you're doing immediately.
It was terrible in the beginning.
That's sweet.
I told you that at the time.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's different now. I mean, when you're in like location-based entertainment, you basically just have to like hide behind a bush and look at people playing and see what parts they vibe with and what parts they don't vibe with. Now, like, we have a fully remote team, and we basically just invite people into our Discord server and have them like share their screen while they're playing the game, which is nice because like it's interesting because we do get perspectives just like from all over the world. We have playtesters from like Spain and like all over Europe, all over Asia, all over South America, and it really informs like our sort of design process now.
Dylan, you want to talk about your?
Yeah, I'd say I think drive. You make, you keep making, and you've always been making. And I think we've all. I do think we've all. You've engendered that in all of us, and it makes me wonder about all of the beautiful things we could have had if people had that drive to finish them, right? How many books and games and films and whatever that were allowed to get stopped, and yeah.
The trick is to keep yourself from being bored, and kind of my theory of raising kids is, one, shame them unmercifully when they do crappy things. Second,
It's his gift to the psychology industry.
We've all sat on
and
the
then,
couch.
and if they don't have a few things that they have to go to therapy about, then you're not doing a good job as a parent. Second, don't give them any money. Make them earn every damn penny. Now, you can trick them a little bit, like we used to.
I might need to interrupt.
Never mind. I don't want to.
I'm like, yeah.
Then, the other thing, surround them with a lot of stuff. And at a very early age, a lot of stuff with the glue gun. And then later on, a soldering iron. And everybody should be a builder all the time. And later on, software. I can remember teaching the kids how to do a doom wad. Remember doom wads back in the old days? First I did is they created a world with a whole bunch of weapons. But I think that a rich environment for your kids is really important. And just don't let them slack off,
Well, I think
Mackenzie Bezos had a great line, which was on the topic of power tools. I'd rather have a kid with 9 fingers than one that was incompetent. And I was like, yeah, that about puts the...
Yeah, I will say the philosophy that I've taken with me is just try. Because you're like, just try it, see what happens, And it's sort of that experimental philosophy where you're comfortable with quote unquote failure, right? It's more about your comfort with risk, that you are really willing to push that edge and take those risks that other people wouldn't take. And like not worry about it as an absolute failure, if you will, but more as an experience. And learning from that and then being able to iterate from there, I think is one of the things that I just believe in a lot, which is why like I'll try things that most people won't try.
Incidentally, I've got a book out that I want you all to go out and buy. Hey, we're doing this, and it's okay to have a commercial.
It was, I just almost didn't realize you were doing it. It was so subtle and like neatly, like I was like, oh my God, how did he weave that in so effortlessly?
You know, I don't know if you realize, but subtle doesn't work.
You have to talk into your
Definitely when
mic,
there's
Deb.
zero
We can't hear.
attempt.
What? Oh, yeah.
Not
stuck.
talking into your mic doesn't work either.
So the name of the book is Creating the Future of Education. It's by myself and Dr. Leah Haynes. And it's a brilliant book. And you can actually eat them for breakfast. So anyway. And I've got another one coming out, but it's going to be science fiction.
Great. Back to
I gotta say, I read a draft of that sci-fi book, and it was properly weird to have your characters giving each other the advice you've given us all the years.